Hi there, we're going to go through a basic introduction to the SPSS interface. So to start with, if you're just on your computer and you have SPSS installed there, go ahead and you can just simply search for IBM and you'll see the program pop up. It should say IBM SPSS Statistics. And typically when SPSS opens up, you'll see this splash screen pop up, and this is giving you options for, what kind of data do you want to open. Do you just want to open up a blank file? You would click here, or maybe you want to open up a recent file that had been open in the past. We'll just go ahead and open a blank file. And we'll go ahead and actually open another type of file in a different way, and that's by going to the File tab. You can open up different types of data from here using New, Open, or Import Data. If you want a new data set, just a blank file, just select Data here from New. If you want to open SPSS data from somewhere on your computer, you can go here. And you can also open up other types of SPSS files here as well. You can also import other types of data that is in different kinds of formats, like Excel data, CSV, or text, etc. So we're going to go ahead and open an Excel file, and I'll click on that, and I happen to have it here in my downloads folder, but if yours isn't in your downloads folder, you can search for the location using the drop down here. So we'll go ahead and choose that file, and first you kind of want to look to see, is this file set up the way you expect to see it, right? And it does seem to be correct, right? So we'll go ahead and we'll select OK. If it doesn't look right, you might try clicking in some other settings to see if it will arrange correctly. And so we'll go ahead and click OK. And you can see the data come up. So in the new version of SPSS, older versions will have two tabs down here in the lower left-hand corner. The newer version has a third. And the third tab is just sort of an overview of the data that you just imported. And here it's kind of giving you a description of it. Like it's saying I have almost 33% of continuous data and about 67% nominal data. Data view is just that. It's the view of the data. And in data view, your data is laid out much like it is in Excel, where each column represents a different variable. Or maybe if this was data from questions that were asked on a survey or an exam, each column would be each question that you asked, and then each row would be an individual's answers to all those questions, right? So for row 1, this is one person who answered all of these questions, right? It has a customer ID number, which is just identifying them, and the rest is would be answers to several questions that was asked. If you have data that is coded, a handy dandy feature it has is this little button here. If you click on it, you can see it change if the data was coded. And this particular data doesn't seem to be, but if it had been, sometimes we like to code data where maybe zeros stand for none, and maybe 1 stands for, 0 stands for no and 1 stands for yes. And if you had your data coded, if you clicked on that button, the words would show up, and if you clicked it again, the numbers would show up. Some other things about this view, you can print out your data, you can save it, Let's see, this there's different tabs up here. You can often, this is the button that you would use quite often, the Analyze tab, where you can select different statistical tests from this drop down. You can transform your data, so say maybe you wanted to add several variables together to come up with a total. You could compute variable, for example. You can recode your variables, and etc. You can use the date time wizard to make date time calculations, for example. Some other things you can do in the data tab, you can merge different SPSS files or data sets. You can sort your cases. You can do lots of different things in this area. Let's see, what else? We have the file button also will let you save from this area. And then we have a graphs button, which will give you which will let you create different graphs based on your data. So that is most of the basics you would need to just sort of get your feet wet for understanding the SPSS interface on the Data View tab. And if you click Variable View, this is the data laid out much differently. Now we don't have any information related to individuals' answers to each question. Now the Variable View tab is just that. It's the view of the variables. So each row now, instead of a person's answers, is describing each variable. So we have the customer ID, and it gives what the name of it is. So we have different names, and it's something important to know about when you're giving your variables names. You cannot have any spaces in the names or any other characters besides text. So you can only use texts and underscores in this column when you're naming them. If you give it a label, you can be more descriptive, and you can name it with spaces like customer ID now, instead of mashing them together, for example. The next column here describes the type of data that it is. So there's different things, different kinds of data. So this is labeled as string data, or it's indicated as string data, which means it's text data. We saw that the customer ID wasn't really words per se, but it was a mixture of letters and numbers, so it lists it as string data. You can also label data as dates or currency, as numeric, etc. The width just provides, it tells SPSS how many characters is allowed for that space. It helps to keep your data file down to a minimum, right? So if you have a very large data set, you kind of want to watch that so you're not allowing too much width, so that when you save it, you don't end up with an extremely large data file, right? Or you want to keep it down to as much of a minimum as possible. The other thing you might notice is this column called decimals, and that is if you have a numeric data, it's how many spaces is allowed after the decimal. Here, they're allowing 15 spaces for income, and if we go look at this this inc variable, we'll probably see something that looks like that, and you can see it's giving quite a few spaces for that. So if I bring that down to a normal level, maybe we're going to just give it 2 spaces, you'll see that change. And now you can see in ink is now just, it's reduced, right? The next thing we just went through labels, where you can be more descriptive with the names for your variables. And then values is where you will code your data. So let's see, if I had, for example, a gender variable where I gave males, for example, a number 1 and females a number 2, here's where I can tell SPSS what 1s and 2s mean. If I click the plus sign, I could put, for every 1 value, label it males, right? And then I can add that and do the same for females. so that when I do click this button up here, when I'm in data view, it will switch back from the numeric label to, or numbers, to the text form of it, right? Here in the missing column, it tells SPSS how to treat missing variables. And then we have, well, align, I guess it just aligns the data. You can do it left, right, center. Measure is very important. This is where you tell SPSS whether it's nominal, scale, or ordinal, right? So scale is just continuous data. It's where you would have your interval or ratio data, pardon me. Then it labels out separately categorical data as either ordinal or nominal. So the reason scale data lumps all the ratio and interval data together is because most statistical tests don't differentiate between the two when it's conducting analysis. But there are different types of tests for either ordinal or nominal data. Hence the difference. Roll, it's not used too often, and basically it's telling SPSS how to treat the variable. Is it an independent variable? Is it dependent variable, etc.? Is it both? All right, so that pretty much covers all the main things you would need to know to sort of get your feet wet and get started with SPSS. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you next time.